Hello, everybody. It's great to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation to Sinter Cafe. I'm going to talk today about the U.S. coffee market trends, so looking more about consumption, understanding where the consumer is heading right now, looking at retail trends, and also looking at out-of-home consumption channels. So, first of all, let me talk to you about Rabobank. There's a problem with the sound. Yep. Okay. So let me talk to you about Rabobank and what we do in the space of beverages. We're one of the leading banks in the world. Beverages, we have clients. Sorry, so I'm going to talk here. So Rabobank is one of the leading financial institutions in beverages. We operate in alcoholic drinks, juices, water, soft drinks, and of course, coffee is one of the most important sectors for us. Warm welcome to some of those clients who are here today. Great to have the opportunity to speak to you live. Just talking about our exposure to the beverages sector, we can proudly say that Rabobank banks 18 of the 25 largest beverage companies in the world. That totals around 86 clients in total that we bank in beverages, and we have an exposure of around $8 billion to the industry. So quite a significant part of the activities we do globally. Just to give you some background, Rabobank is today the largest bank in the Netherlands. And outside Holland, we exclusively operate in food and agribusiness. And of course, beverages is one of the key sectors for us. So within Rabobank, we have a specialized team called the Food and Agri Research Team. We're analysts that focus specifically on those sectors where the bank operates. And this gives us a competitive edge. We see it as an added value service to our clients. We're able to provide reports on market prices, on consumer trends, on how commodities interact with the industry, and what's happening around the world in those sectors where the bank operates, so both for our internal and external clients. I'm proud to say that I'm part of the beverages team based in Sao Paulo, so of course I have a close connection to what's happening in the world of coffee, both from a producer standpoint, but also from roasters, traders, and of course I work very closely with our teams in the US to try and understand what's happening with the consumer in America. So let me just give you a quick overview of where we see value growth in coffee over the next 5 years. So this is a projection looking at 2015 to 2020. And the key highlight here is that 72% of value growth is going to come from 3 markets: the US, Brazil, and Canada. So this is dollar sales, and this is where the largest value growth is happening right now in the world. Other markets stand out as well, as the UK and Italy. But if you look at the top 10 markets, these 3 stand out as the ones that are going to produce the most value growth for coffee in coming years. Okay, so the first part of the presentation, I want to focus on the American consumer. We tried to do a very up-to-date analysis of the trends we're seeing in the US, understanding how consumers are behaving, trying to understand the different segments of consumption. And of course, it's a very big word to talk about the American consumer. You have many segments. You can look at it from a demographic standpoint. You can look at it from an economic standpoint, from a racial standpoint, from a generation standpoint. You can even look at it from a political standpoint, which, right now, of course, is a big topic. Everyone's thinking about the elections that just happened. And it's interesting. If you look at how counties voted within each state, you see that there are clear discrepancies between capital cities of states and larger cities and small town America and rural America. So, just to give an example, we have to think about all the differences that the consumers have, and it's really a very diverse consumer base in the States. So the first interesting point is to talk about breakfast and today's consumer. Back in the 20th century, pretty much every family would have breakfast at home. Most families would have children. A lot of people getting married earlier, and all of these trends are changing. What this means is that families are having less and less breakfast at home, and as a result, their coffee consumption is changing dramatically. So this chart provides us a view of household change in the US. So if you look back at 1940, around 43% of households were married and had children. Today, or 2010, that is the latest figure, that number came down to 20%. If you look at what's happening today, 27% of households in the US are single. So either single men or single women living by themselves. It's a completely different picture to what we had back in the 40s and the 60s, where 8% and 13% were single-family households. So this is a key trend to understand why consumers are having less breakfast at home, why they buy less products for kids, why nutrition demands have changed at the household. The first trend that I want to highlight here, and this is from a study, the American Coffee Association, is looking at how much coffee Americans are drinking at breakfast. And if you look at the trends here, you can see that steadily, the number of respondents that say, do you drink coffee at breakfast, has come down from 91% back in 2010 to 82% in 2016. That's significant. Interestingly as well, if you look at it from a generation standpoint, 92% of 60-plus-year-olds have coffee for breakfast. Only 74% of 18 to 24-year-olds and 77% of 25 to 39-year-olds have coffee at breakfast. So there's a clear generational difference between coffee consumption at breakfast in the States. Also, looking at it from an ethnic point of view, the US today is a much more diverse place. Back in the 1960s, 80% were white, Caucasian white. The projection is that number will decline to around half of the population. Also, if you look at immigration, has changed dramatically. In 1975, 60% of immigrants in the US were white. That number is already down to 18%. And if you look at how, of course, Latino population increasing significantly due to immigration, but also Asians will become the largest migrant population by 2055. So all of these trends are important for us to understand where the market is headed and how different ethnicities also influence what people eat and drink at home. This is a very interesting result as well from this survey, which shows us that Hispanics are the most frequent coffee drinkers in America. If you think about it, African Americans, only 40% responded that they drank coffee during the past day to the survey done earlier this year, compared to 51% of Asian Americans, 58% of white Americans, and as I said, almost 70% of Hispanic Americans responded that they had consumed coffee over the past day. Generation, of course, we already heard a little bit about this in the previous presentation. But millennials are not the future. Millennials are the present. They're already the largest generation in the US, 92 million of millennials, so people born between 1981 and 1995, compared to 61 million people of Generation X. Those are people born between 65 and 81. And baby boomers, 77 million, of course, a very large population, but now declining in numbers as they age. Also, millennials are, or will be in 2017, the generation with the biggest spending power in the States, and that's very significant because they are the ones that are leading in terms of purchasing at home and out of home in the out-of-home channels. So some of the interesting points about millennials, as I said, around 29% of the population today, health conscious. They like premium, they're very concerned about ingredients, they want to understand sustainability, they want to understand where products come from. 30% of them say they eat organic versus 21% of Generation X and only 15% of baby boomers. They preferred artisanal and handcrafted products to big brands. I think this is very, very telling. So they are looking for craft, they are looking for local, they are looking for sustainable, they are looking for organic, and they're not fans of big brands. So some of the key trends relating to coffee, not just from the NCA survey, but also from some of our own proprietary research, is that iced coffee and cold brew are growing very strongly with millennials. That's important. 48% of millennials drank espresso in 2015 in the States. If you look at drip coffee consumption, only 40% drink drip coffee compared to 70% of 60-plus-year-olds. So a clear generational difference. This relates exactly to what Starbucks was saying in this morning's presentation. You know, how baby boomers and Generation X grew with that drip coffee consumption pattern, and still many of them retain that tradition. Millennials are evaluating that and changing that, drinking more cold brew, other types of coffees. Millennials are more likely to add non-dairy milk to their coffee than older consumers. That's also significant. So a lot more non-dairy mixers. And I think this is the most telling of all. 50% drink coffee out of home compared to just 16% of 60-plus-year-olds. So millennials are the ones that are driving this growth and this boom in the out-of-home channels in the U.S. They're drinking, they're having less breakfast at home. Many of them live in single households. Many of them don't have breakfast in the morning, and many of them drink coffee out of home. So all of those are essential trends to understand where this market is headed. So if we also look at traditional coffee, not gourmet coffee, of course there are very different trends here. The 40-plus-year-olds consume more traditional, not gourmet coffee. So you look here at 40 to 59-year-olds and 60-plus-year-olds. They say that in the past they consume traditional coffee. And most of them didn't drink gourmet coffee. Younger consumers, as I already said, drink more espresso and gourmet coffee. So millennials and even younger than millennials drinking more gourmet coffee beverages and also espresso. So a clear generational gap here in this trend. Now, single cup is today the largest category in the retail space, or the one that has grown the most in the retail space in the US. Interesting to see, of course, how Americans make their coffee at home. So this again relating to what was mentioned this morning in Starbucks' presentation. Back in 2011, 70% of households used drip or had a drip coffee maker to make their daily coffee. This number came down to 50%. This is very significant. So a 20% decline in drip coffee, in making drip coffee in the morning in households in the US. By contrast, if you look at single cup brewers, only 9% of households had single cup brewers at home. This number has peaked at 28%. So very significant trends. However, there's an interesting pattern in the last 3 years. If you look at single cup brewers, you know, that number has sort of stopped growing at around that close to 30% level. So that's significant when we think about what single cup coffee is going to do in the next few years. The number of households that have single cup brewing machines seems to have peaked at around 30% in the US. So that's very important for us to consider in the next section, retail trends. Okay, so I just want to give some key takeaways on the consumer. Changing household composition impacting breakfast patterns. That's very clear. Out of the NCA survey, Hispanics are the most frequent coffee consumers, with African Americans less frequent. Millennials are drinking more gourmet coffee and espresso than older consumers. They want to customize coffee. They want a product that is different and that is specially made for them. And that not only applies to drinks, but also food, clothes, and all sorts of consumer goods in the States. Millennials want customized products, and that's important to remember. Spending power and demographics mean that millennials will drive in coming years. They will drive trends in coming years as baby boomer population declines and Generation X moves closer to retirement age. So a real shift in spending power in the States, with millennials driving consumer trends in the next few years. Okay, so we've talked about the consumer. Now let's focus on retail market trends. So interestingly, retail sales grew at a compounded annual growth rate of 4.6% in the last 5 years in the States. They moved from 8 billion in 2012 up to 9.5 billion in 2016. So pretty healthy growth, you'd have to agree, given that it's, you know, developed economy, mature market. However, interesting to see that growth has been slowing down. We saw growth of 13% back in 2012, and that's now down to around 1% in 2016. So that's also a pretty interesting situation. Retail growth in coffee is slowing in the US in 2016 and growing much slower than what it grew in the last 5 years. And what helps explain this trend? Well, single cup, of course, it's at the center of this. If you look at how big single cup is, it now represents 41% of retail sales. It only represented 21% back in 2012. If you look at ground coffee, which was traditionally by far the largest category, it represented 60% back in 2012, only 45% in 2016. So quite a significant decline in what ground coffee represents in total retail sales in the US. And interestingly, single cup's rapid growth is slowing down. And that helps us understand why the overall market is only growing at 1% in 2016. If you look at 2012, single cup was growing at astronomical figures, 60%, in 2013, 45%. That came down to 25% in 2014. And now we're only growing at 5% single cup retail sales in the US. And of course, given that it now represents 40+% of the total retail category, it has a big impact on growth in 2016. And the other important thing to consider is that everything else has declined since 2012. So instant coffee is down 11% over the last 5 years. This is dollar sales. Ground coffee is down 9%, and whole beans are down 11%. So pretty significant declines for all of those mature traditional categories. Of course, single cup cannibalizing some of those sales and helping push overall value up, because value per kilo or value per pound is much higher in single cup than in any of these categories. So single cup will continue to be key for sales growth in coming years. Even if it's slowing down, it's the category that has grown the fastest. And if it really slows down or declines in coming years, then overall retail sales in the US could see some declines. It's not the scenario we're seeing at the moment, but there are some important considerations to make about single cup. Actually, I took this picture at Keurig's innovation store up in Burlington, Massachusetts. It really is an incredible store. If any of you are in the Boston area at some point in the future, I would encourage you to go and visit this, because the number of brands and different products is really incredible. So, what's slowing down single cup's advance, and how companies can keep momentum going in the single cup space? The first point that I'll make regarding single cup is that although it's very large in dollars, 41%, in volume it's only around 15%. So if you think about it, there's still a lot of volume that could potentially be converted into higher value single cup products. Only 15% in volume compared to 41% in value. However, this is a really interesting chart. So here we see the blue bars are Keurig Green Mountain's market share back in 2006. It grew very rapidly to around 60% in 2009, and since then it has declining to around 35–40% in 2015. Interestingly, the price of single cup sort of reflects a little bit that trend. So single cup pricing increased very rapidly to around 25% growth in just a few years, and now it's been declining, and we see pricing in single cup back at the levels we had it back in 2006. So pricing per pound in single cup increased rapidly, and then as more entrants joined the market, as more private label entered single cup, pricing started coming down. So of course, this is natural. As there's more competition, pricing tends to decline, and it's one of the reasons why value sales are growing only marginally in 2016. The other thing that helped single cup grow very quickly over the last few years was the expansion in brands. So today, Keurig Green Mountain has around 500 varieties, 75 brands, and the top 10 coffee brands in America are all available in single cup. So of course, to grow from this level onto the next level is going to be much more challenging because you have less brands to add. It's more about smaller brands, organic. You start to getting more into a craft space that not necessarily plays exactly into the hands of the single cup platform. Another reason why the category is slowing down, and this is something that it's been big on the media and that people hear about all the time, is the environmental impact of single cup. Of course, companies are reacting to this, using more recycling schemes available, and this is something that will be a big challenge for the next phase of growth of single cup. New technology and innovation, of course, are essential to keep momentum going. So consumers are looking for to be able to interact more with their machines, control them from their cell phones, preset their preferences for the day of the week. They want to have a lot more flexibility and a lot more technology in the machines. So we think that in order for the industry to continue growing at rapid rates, they need more and more new innovation and new technology to keep consumers engaged, and especially those millennials that are drinking less coffee at home and that are looking more for craft and out-of-home consumption. So what are the key takeaways from retail? Single cup has grown while all other categories have contracted since 2012, as I mentioned. Instant and ground coffee declining in 2016, but interestingly, whole beans are showing some growth in the most recent data points. So consumers starting to go back to whole beans, grinding their own coffee, making their own coffee. More espresso consumption, of course, plays in the hands of this trend. Pricing has suffered as private label has increased, and that'll be an additional channel, an additional challenge to single cup. And technology and innovation in new flavors, beverage offerings will help maintain momentum in single cup. So even though all of the large brands are already in these platforms, companies will have to innovate and add new products if they want to keep the consumer engaged. Okay, let's look now at out-of-home channels, which have been growing very strongly and have sort of reflected that change in generation consumption, in gender consumption, in demographic consumption in the US, and let's try to understand a little bit why that's been. So one of the first things I'll say is that low unemployment has helped boost out-of-home consumption growth in the US. So as the economy recovered since the financial crisis and unemployment declined to below 5% where it is now, out-of-home consumption, not just of coffee but of many categories, has been growing healthily. So consumers feeling more confident, they go out, they're prepared to spend more on their coffee out of home. Okay, so what are consumers drinking out of home? So this picture I took at a specialty cafe in Washington, D.C. It's called Phil's Coffee, and it sort of reflects some of the trends that we've seen in specialty coffees out in the West Coast. So a lot more of these specialty single store or small chain coffees appearing on the East Coast as well. That's helping drive new trends in out-of-home consumption. So we're seeing, a lot of variety in roasts, consumers being able to customize their cup to exactly the type of coffee that they want. You see dark roast, medium roast, light roast, decaf, of course, a lot of specialities, a lot of cold brew coffee being sold at out-of-home channels. That's another big trend that I'm going to talk in a minute. Unique blends. So these are unique roasts and unique blends that this specialty coffee serves that consumers won't be able to get anywhere else in the city, and they like it. They want to try different things. They want to try unique. So this is why this trend is becoming very popular and why consumers are spending, quite a bit for a cup. Just a reflection of, one of the main coffee thinkers in the world, Andrea Ili from Ili Coffee, saying, I'm seeing more and more espresso, more and more better coffee being made by consumers. So look, we talked about specialty coffees. Let's talk about mainstream quick service restaurants like Dunkin' Donuts. We see a lot more, of course, original coffee, but espresso, lattes, macchiatos, cappuccinos, iced coffees, cold brews, frozen, flavored. A lot of options for consumers in mainstream restaurants like Dunkin' Donuts. Interestingly, they sell their own single cup brands at most of the stores, so consumers eat and have breakfast or eat a sandwich or a donut, they have their cup of coffee, and they also pick up their single cup coffee that they'll drink later at home. If you look at the menu at Dunkin' Donuts, this is actually from Penn Station in New York. I took this like a month ago, so it's pretty recent. You see that, pricings, consumers are prepared to pay $4 for a cup of coffee. A lot of cappuccino, as I said, iced coffee, cold brew, very big in Dunkin' Donuts. The CEO of Dunkin' Donuts gave an interview on Bloomberg News just a couple of weeks ago. He was talking about, their quarterly results, but also talking about trends. And he said, millennials love iced coffee, and cold brew is a really big hit. He said, it's one of the most successful coffee launches we've ever had. Millennials love it, consumers love it, and it's a big hit. So, not only at specialty coffees, but also at quick service restaurants, we're seeing this trend where consumers want different products. According to the National Coffee Association, 15% of coffee drinkers tried cold brew in 2015. We reckon that that number is probably going to go up to 30% in 2016. So, low acidity, smooth taste profile, all of those playing very, very well in the hands of millennials and consumers. Starbucks also reporting some very strong performance in Q3 2016. What's hot in Starbucks? Cold brew, seasonal, almond milk, caramel mocha, frappuccino, single origin. Actually, this was a very successful cold brew launch that they had in the autumn. That was a Nariño cold brew using a Colombian single origin coffee. It did very well, and it helped them grow sales in Q3. So just to wrap up, key takeaways on food service. Food service coffee sales are growing stronger than retail in 2016. So we see consumers pushing their sales more in out-of-home channels. Full employment helping. Cold brew, we think it's much more than a seasonal trend. We think it scores high with younger consumers, and it's going to be very big again in 2017. Millennials, as I already said, increasing their out-of-home consumption, and quick service restaurants, coffee shops, donut shops, expanding their menus and offering better quality alternatives in coffee to the consumer. So just to give you some final remarks, some final trends on our outlook for the US coffee market. I think this is important and we have to pay attention to this. Local roasts are gaining popularity, both in retail and food service. So in most of the big metro areas, we're seeing a lot of small local roasters appear. They import their own green beans from single origin places like Costa Rica, Central America, Colombia, Africa. They roast their own coffee and they sell it. Consumers are big on that. They want to understand their coffees and they want to know who's roasting their coffee. Seasonal, of course, you know, it's a big trend. Starbucks did a really good job with Halloween and pumpkin spiced drinks. Consumers want to understand origin. They want to get closer to the farmer. You know, just giving some examples, talking to our clients, to our coffee producers, clients in Brazil, we see a lot of international buyers coming to their farms, spending time with them, understanding their product, and we see that, you know, that link between the end buyer and the farmer is getting much closer. So buyers are more and more trying to get closer to the farmer. Again, a lot of cold brew, ready-to-drink products coming on board. Many of these will probably not survive for more than a couple of years, as it happens in energy drinks, in juices, in waters. You know, it's a big trend of innovation, small innovation in the US, which ends up creating the big next thing. So just to wrap up my presentation, some conclusions here. The US coffee market continues growing. It's exciting, it's full of innovation and opportunities. In retail, single cup will continue to dictate overall growth. So if single cup reverses in coming years, retail sales will probably decline. Food service is the fastest growing platform today. And we see more premium, more iced coffee, more single origin than ever before. Again, just to mention this trend, millennials driving trends in coming years as they become the largest consumer group with the biggest spending power in America. And finally, you know, remember that consumers want a unique experience. They want, yes, consistency and price, but those are no longer the main drivers as they were for previous generations. Consumers want premiumization. They want a unique experience. They want a unique cup of coffee, and they want to be able to customize their cup whenever they drink it at home or whenever they go out to out-of-home channels. Thank you very much.